na? Tapos na?
Wala pa. Starting ko lang po.
Ay, start.
Turn left.
Thank you.
And we'll all go back in here after turkey.
Kaya na, ito naman. Pay it 500. That's why I said I don't know if you're gonna get
Yeah, I got a puppy.
that's why.
Little golden retriever.
Sorry.
That's alright. Jangan sebarin dong.
Hope you understand. I plan to do this at 12 and give you plenty of time, and of course it all changes. Never mind. It's our biggest selling wine, and there's a reason why it sells well. So I'm going to go around and pour a bit of Pinot Gris. Carlei, you available to do a pour? Where's Steve? Steve, where's Steve? The rest of the world that if you use their chemicals, it would protect their crop and they'd get yields. They worked on the economics of the dollar. So they convinced people to spray certain things on their plants that were synthetic, right? Now, let's explain labelling laws. You need to know this. If you look at a bottle of wine, it basically says the variety and it says minimal preservatives, 228. What they don't tell you is the ingredients that are used to grow the grapes. And if we had to list the ingredients to grow the grapes, it'd be this long. Okay? Now our list is about that big because we don't use any of those chemicals. Okay? Now, why do we use those chemicals? Because there's certain potential diseases that will entrench in a vineyard, particularly if you want to get high crop levels. So if you want to boost your production, you're going to cause a weakness in that vial which predisposes it to infections, if you like, molds and mildews. Okay? Now, we don't use those sprays, we only use the natural ones, but we find if we keep the crops low, not be too greedy about the cropping levels, we take away that disease pressure, we find we don't get the diseases. So it's a little bit more expensive from an economic comparative. Okay? So don't be sucked in by that. What I'm saying is, my motto is, real wines don't need to be compared, just appreciated. So that's why I have these different varieties. Some people prefer Gris, some people prefer Chardonnay, some people prefer Chardonnay from this location, that location. The only difference is that with white wine, we press the grapes and the juice comes out, we end up with white wine when it's fermented. With red wine, we leave it on the skins because the skins has the pigment. And that's where it comes from. Okay, and that's the difference between red wine and white wine. And then of course you've got different varieties. Now grapes are really interesting. Does anybody want to drink? Yeah, you all done and dusted? Okay, smell it. Sun. So let's talk about that. There are 4 elements. The Greeks came up with it over 3,000 years ago. Does anybody want me to tell the 4 elements? They basically said you need those 4 elements for life to exist. And they were spot on. The earth, sun.
So, pang-apat na ito. Pang-apat na pagka-test kasama ko si Gary.
Now, if one of those elements is
Pang-apat na ito.
missing,
Ha? Pang-apat pa
you
lang.
won't get life. And I'll tell you why
May
you won't
10
get
pa.
life. Want a drink?
Elements.
Now, I want you to smell the wine. You know, you get an aroma, all right, whatever you perceive. You'll notice it's fruity. It's got, you know, black pepper, berry fruits. I want you to taste it and tell me how much it's drying on your palate or not. You know, now this is fruit taste. Now, let me explain the 4 elements. Sun,
Sun,
earth,
earth,
wind,
wind,
rain. Okay? Sun, okay, we start with wind, CO2 in the atmosphere. Rain, H2O. Right? CO2 plus
C.
H2O in the
C.
presence of
H2O.
magnesium chlorophyll, the element of earth, with photons of light via the sun, you have got the equation called photosynthesis. You've all heard of photosynthesis. You eat it, that green stuff, right? And that's what creates the organic life. So without that photosynthesis, you wouldn't have the plants, and then you wouldn't have the cattle that eat. So just think about that, okay? So those 4 elements, the Greeks worked it out 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Right now, what we find in biodynamics is those elements play, they come and go, they attenuate. They come and go over a 72-hour period. As the Earth spins, and it's all got to do with magnetic fields, with the sun, the planets, okay, and the Earth spinning. So believe it or not, it's the magnetic gravity that's causing this cosmological dance. Now let me give you an example of how effective it is. There are 2 types of cells in your body that build bone and big bone, osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Now what happens is when you're standing here, the body senses gravity. So what happens is the osteoblasts lay down bone material and build your bones up, okay? Now, if I remove the gravity, what happens is the body's conservative. It says, I don't need the calcium there because the calcium is more important in the blood. If your calcium levels change just a little bit, you can die, okay? So that overrides. But what happens is gravity has an effect. So what happens to the astronauts when they're up in space, no gravity, what do you think happens to their bones? They thin. Yeah. They thin. So they come back osteoporotic. So here's a good example about how gravity affects cells, okay? Cells respond to gravity. They do. Gravity emerges as a healing force, and because cells respond to it, okay? Now, this is in the biodynamic realm, and a lot of other people who don't promote the biodynamics think we've got witches' hats and broomsticks and we fly around all day in the wine, and I just whirl around here all the time. Okay, so that's a bit of an idea about biodynamics. It's got to do with gravity and how how cycles operate, and a biodynamic farmer knows those cycles. We learn those cycles. In fact, there's a calendar. So for example, if you're going to plant plants, I suggest you do it 2 days before the full moon, because you get rapid growth. If you plant 2 days before the new moon, you get stunted growth. Okay? Now, as to why, it's got to do with gravitational fields and cycles, and I'm sure at some point in time they'll produce it. Okay, is that right, Doc? Yeah. This is the element of a root.
Panglimang piece na ito. Panglimang alak.
Right? Now, you notice a different wine, but I can tell you this now, they are exactly the same wine, they taste different.
What?
So what happens is that now, why do I do that? I do it because it's a tool of agriculture. Because you see, I like the elements of fruit and I like the elements of the root. But what I need to do is blend them in a more complete wine. So it's a tool of function. So I'm using biodynamic. These are different vineyards that were harvested on a fruit day or a root day, depending on the vintage. And I can give you a barrel taste, which we won't have time now. It's not very sweet actually. It's only about 30 grams, as opposed to muscat, which is 120 grams. What it smell like? The hint will give it away. So when I say it, you'll go, oh, yes. Okay, now is everybody going to smell of this taste? You got to taste? Yeah, late harvest, and it's 2008 vintage. Yeah, thanks very much, guys.
Mga 2008 lang yung hihingin namin dito. Balik na bagay. Bakla na yung 2015. Masarap yung ano?
Madadalas ako rito.
Ito talaga yung mga tinikikan namin.
Bottles that you can buy. So it's something that you hold, and when you do pour it, you decant it, but you have it over time. You drink it over an hour period, so the flavour evolves over an hour period. So when you hear Serge and Dave talk about how to make wines, it's the most fun shit. Because
So Serge's history. So Serge is a scientist. So Serge is a scientist by trade. So
Yeah,
Serge used to. So Serge's history is he used to work for Castrol Oil.
yeah.
And he's a chemist by trade. So he's very scientific in the way he approaches wine, but he's also very esoteric because he got introduced to winemaking by his grandfather. They used to do it in the garage, and he always used and he's hear him talk about root day, fruit day, and all of that stuff, and moon phases and biodynamics.
May ilaw sa under the eyes of beautiful.